defined as the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country.
How does one, I guess you'd say, legally immigrate to the U.S.?
So the legal process consists of, usually the main goal for an immigrant would be to apply permanent residency, and this is in the form of a green card. But before you can get this, you have to actually acquire a legal status or a visa. And there's a lot of different ways to acquire a visa, but from our research we found I guess the most common would be a family-based immigrant. If you're a highly skilled worker, a student, an asylee, a refugee seeker, or also if you're a member of the armed forces. And if you're any of those, there's different criteria for each. And then you can apply for that and receive that. And then once your visa is on the verge of expiring, you can apply for a green card, which would allow you to get your permanent residency.
So I noticed from your paragraph that you're prepared mostly to talk about immigration at the southern border. I'm intrigued by your comment that we are familiar with its convenience for the individual. Now I'm watching the news. I don't see a lot that seems convenient about coming through our southern border. Could you explain what that means?
Well, of all the people that enter illegally, 97% of them come through the southern border because it's the easiest port to get. There's 330 ports that you can enter, and it's the easiest of all of our country. So most people, if they are going to enter illegally, which is about a third of all illegal immigrants, they come through our southern border.
But isn't that also true because they're coming from countries to the south of the United States?
Yes. And another thing with the convenience would be, we actually spoke with an immigration attorney and we asked her about this, and she said that one of the reasons that people feel the need to come across the border so much is because there's so much backlog with the application process, and it takes so long to get a visa that some people are waiting for years, and they're finally just like, you know what, I'm just going to have to go because I don't know how much longer I'm going to have to wait.
So isn't that just being impatient?
Yes.
Which makes it more convenient for whoever wants to come in here. Instead of waiting and doing the proper process, they're just like, okay, I'll find a way through a little loophole, and they enter, and then most of them then reside in sanctuary cities.
I would like to ask the question for you to distinguish between a refugee and an immigrant.
A refugee would be someone that is coming from a country of political strife, or possibly like if you're a target of a hate crime yourself. So if you're fleeing from a really bad situation that you can prove. An immigrant, I guess, could be a broader term that includes that person, but an immigrant would just be referring to anyone that wants to come or anyone that is coming.
An alien to the United States.
So technically, all Americans at some point were immigrants, were
Yes.
aliens, came from someplace else.
Yes, it's some,
So why is this issue in the news? Why is it a hot topic today?
Probably because of the border crisis, or currently Donald Trump has not deported a lot of people compared to Obama, and the immigration, like deportation, like jails and stuff, are very overcrowded. They're the most overcrowded in the U.S. history right now.
You use the word border crisis. Depending on which news station I turn on, there either is a crisis at the border or there's not a crisis at the border. So just
Correct.
from your lady's standpoint, do you feel like there is a crisis at the border or there's not? How do we get to this whole border crisis thing? Is it changes or what's going on?
Well, for me personally, my biggest concern is when you look at the illegal immigrant population,
Okay.
the 2/3 majority of illegals in here are actually just people overstaying their visa. So for me, that's the biggest concern. The border crossing is an issue, but I think that I think the media has projected it as a bigger issue in comparison to overstaying the visa, because that is my top priority.
So if I'm hearing you correct, Jalen, you're saying there's not a border crisis. The bigger crisis is the people who are overstaying their visas.
Yes.
As far as illegal immigration is
Yes,
concerned.
right.
Okay. All
Are
right.
more of those people arriving by aircraft and from other countries, or are these people overstaying their visa coming through the southern border? Are more people coming through the southern border, or more people just flying here and staying beyond the permitted?
It's a
time period?
combination of both. The southern border crossings obviously is like the Mexico, Central America area. That's the majority of that. But for overstaying your visa, we actually found that it was from other areas like that make up the most of that.
Do you think President Trump's policies and statements regarding immigration are contributing to more people trying to cross the southern border or less people trying to cross the southern border?
Well, the first thing I can think of in regard to President Trump is his ending of DACA applications. So I'm sure you're familiar with DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That was instituted by the Obama administration in June 2012, which essentially gave immigrant youth the ability to be exempt from deportation as well as acquire a work permit for 2 years. And Trump actually ended this in September 2017. And so I think as this opportunity has been taken away, it's kind of, in the immigrant mind, it's possibly put a fear factor in, like, oh, these opportunities are being taken away, so now I'm gonna have to find other modes of getting into the country.
I would agree with her in the sense that there were 800,000 people that had DACA, and I see that some people who did cross the border illegally, if that's how they came, if that was their motivation for coming, I feel like in a way, since that's no longer an option, it could lessen it a little bit, just because now they don't have this offer for free education and things like that. So I have to agree with that.
Well, what about his statements that, or his efforts to try to reform immigration law or regulations that would require you, before you're able to apply for asylum, that you first have to apply to one of the, I guess, intermediate countries that you're coming through? For example, if you're coming from Honduras, you would have had to apply for asylum in Mexico first before you would get here to the United States. Has that had an impact on the number of people coming to the United States?
Well, Mexico's immigration system is even worse than the United States, so I think it makes a lot of immigrants freak out, so that's why they cross illegally.
Is it worse?
Yes,
Okay.
it's more backed up than the United States is. It would take a longer process of time.
Okay. Do you guys agree that Mexico's immigration process is worse than the United States?
I personally don't have enough information to support that, so I'm not sure.
I might say that it's stricter than the United States, which may make it worse for the illegal immigrant if they're looking to take up residence in
Right.
Mexico. But I believe that it takes an act of God or Congress in order to immigrate to
Yeah.
Mexico, right, to keep those people from flowing through. What do we feel like Mexico's role is in the current, let's just establish for the sake of conversation that there is a crisis at the border, there's an immigration crisis. What do we feel like Mexico's role is currently, and what do we feel like it should or shouldn't be?
Well, 95% of our border apprehensions and arrests are from Mexico and Central America,
Okay.
which is a large majority. And so I think if we're talking about border crisis, a big debate is how we're going to secure ports. And I don't think the Trump administration is doing a great job with that. And
Ports as in ports of entry?
yes, the 300
Not like
ports of entry, not
Shipping
like naval.
ports?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if we were gonna do like a naval blockade or something, okay,
No.
just making sure.
Yeah, so I think Mexico has a big role in that area.
Mexico should have a big role in securing ports, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Maya, how do we feel like Mexico's doing right now in helping us with this?
I don't feel like they're doing too well because honestly, if their people are a problem coming into our country, don't you think it's a halfway thing? Like, we should meet halfway with them.
Okay.
Like, we should protect our country and they should protect their country.
So we don't feel like they're being a good partner in helping to stem the tide of, if we're assuming that there's a border crisis, that they're helping with that?
Yes.
Why is that, Lauren?
Well, the thing is, there's millions of people who are trying to basically escape Mexico, and they're just going to do it anyway, whether that be a visa or illegally over the border.
Mhm.
And so the thing is like, what's the motivation for them wanting to leave so badly that they're willing to come here and break our laws and come live illegally? That's like the question
Do you have
about.
an answer to that question?
I mean, about the why, I do not.
The food is amazing. I love it. Fantastic. So there's a lot of people trying to leave Mexico, and I think Maya said that maybe Mexico's not being as helpful with the crisis that we're having. How are we working with Mexico? Are we working with Mexico to try to make a difference in that, to try to change their attitudes or their approach to what we see as a crisis?
I think I'm not entirely sure what we're doing actively right now,
Okay.
but I know some of the things that we've instituted have possibly harmed that relationship. For example, I think the wall, it might be a good idea in theory, but I think as a symbol, it's not, if you want to have a partnership, I don't think putting a wall between you is a good way to do that. It's not setting a good precedent for that relationship.
It's not inviting.
It's not
And then on
inviting.
top of that, he wants them to pay for it.
Yeah,
So it's
so
almost
that's
like
not-
it's gonna cause conflict more than it's gonna, just between the United States and Mexico, of saying you're gonna pay for it, and then,
Do we care what Mexico thinks about the wall?
Trump does not.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Isn't it his job as commander-in-chief to protect the
Yes.
security of this country?
Yes.
And
Yes.
if we are being flooded by immigrants, I don't know that I necessarily believe they're all from Mexico. He
Right.
listed
No,
them
not all.
Central American countries
Yes.
through Mexico. But if that's one way to stem the tide,
Right.
isn't that his job?
Yes, but I don't think a wall would help with that.
Tell me why not.
Because people would find a way to get around the wall.
Yeah, and for example, in eastern Kentucky, the Red River Gorge area, they recently they kind of made a recreation of the wall. It was an 18-foot wall, and they had just random people, whoever wanted to, come try to climb it. And kids and women were able to scale it in about a minute and a half, and then experienced mountain climbers could do it in about 3 seconds. So that kind of shows that it may keep out some, but it's not going to be a really good long-term plan.
People will find other ways to get into the country.
So couldn't that be said about any solution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
The
personally,
system's flawed.
I think the wall would, and it would heighten a little bit, like it would, what's the word? It would decrease a little bit of the border crossing. Just if a mother and her child are trying to cross illegally, they're not gonna be able to get over an 18-foot wall. Obviously people are gonna find a way. I mean, nothing is gonna be impossible to, there's not a perfect solution, but there is a way to decrease the number of people who cross our border illegally. And I mean, it's not the worst idea. I don't think there's a perfect solution though.
So deterrence,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
Yes.
non-prevention. Okay, let's talk about the mother and child. You mentioned the mother and child.
Yes.
Are most of the people who are trying to enter the United States illegally, are they mothers and children?
I
What do
believe
we
it's
know?
5 million. I don't know.
Like
Family
families?
units?
Yeah, family units. Yes, that means they at least have a child with them, and it could be a mother and child, a husband, a wife, and a child, or multiple children, something along that. But that means there's an adult and a child, and that means there's 5 million
So
of
the
them.
vast majority of them are family units, is that?
About half.
I have a question about economic development in countries in Central America. Do you think the United States should play a role in reducing poverty, reducing gang violence, and eliminating factors that cause people to try to migrate illegally into the United States?
No, we should be doing that in our own country, fixing the
Yeah, I
problems
would
in
say
our country.
we should focus on, we have those problems in our country as well, and I believe that our citizens should be put first before anybody else. And that's just our job as a country, is to put our citizens first.
It kind of reminds me of the whole Afghanistan, Middle East thing, where it was a good idea at first, and a lot of people supported it, but the longer that we're over there, or the longer that we would be in Central America, the more Americans, I feel like, are like, get us out of there, we don't want to be there anymore. I think it's just a long-term problem that it would not end well.
I have another question about unemployment in the United States is 3.8%. There's a lot of jobs that are unfilled, healthcare related, a lot of service jobs. Should we allow more people to migrate to the United States in order to fill this unmet need as far as our economy goes?
Yes.
I think highly, like, the employment can be a really good contributing factor to the economy, because if you look at the need for certain aspects, like, for example, in 2002 there was a big computer technology boom, and we were able to give visas to a lot of Central America highly skilled computer workers, and they were able to come over, and then we saw a really big increase in technology. So I think if there's a need, then we should be able to fill that with that, and it would contribute both sides.
I agree with her. If you come to the United States illegally, there's no problem with that, but illegally.
Yeah,
it's not
if
right.
you wanna come and do it the right way and get a visa, and especially if you're gonna get an employment visa, then you're welcome to a job.
The United States has recently announced that they're going to permit 14,000 refugees. I think that's the number that I heard recently. Do you think we should have more refugees allowed to enter the United States. This is a significantly reduced number. According to what I've read, there's 68 million people that are considered refugees in the world today. Do you think our 14,000 allocation is appropriate?
I think that, so I guess you're referring to the different caps. And so,
Right.
I think that our cap, if we raised our cap, then it might decrease the amount of illegals coming in because there's a greater amount of people that are legally allowed in. So I think that might be helpful. The thing that I'm having a problem with is I don't know if it should be different caps for each category, like family or refugees, or if it should be just an overarching cap.
I agree with Jalen. I think we should look at the family standpoint. Who can get a job and who's eligible to get a job too, because they're gonna affect our economy too. So.
And I think 14,000 is low. I think if these people are, I mean, if they're in, they're seeking refuge, and if they do it, like I said, if they do it through a visa and they're checked and made sure that, they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing, then yes, I think the cap should be raised.
What if the entire country of Argentina wants to become refugees and they want to come to the United States? Are we okay with that?
I would say no, and then the other thing it reminds me of is if you're in the process of being deported, there are different reliefs that you can claim that would allow you to possibly go back. And one of those is asylee or refugee. And one of the qualifications for being able to acquire that is because there's so many people that would claim that, you have to prove that you yourself are a target. And so if you're just saying, my home country is not safe, we can't take that. That's just not possible for us to uphold that. So currently, which I think is a good system, you need to be able to say, I am a direct target, I cannot go home. So, because if you're claiming that your whole country is unsafe, that's not possible for us to take care of, I don't think.
Lauren, I think you were chomping at the bit there. Let me get you in just a second. But let me just take a step back here. I hear the word immigrant or illegal immigrant, and I hear the word refugee, and it seems like so oftentimes we're shifting our categorization of a group of people or individuals. I'm a refugee, no, I'm an immigrant, no, I'm a refugee, no, I'm a... Explain to me the difference between these groups of people and how this country handles both of those, immigrants versus refugees. What's the difference? Are they the same thing? Is it just a synonym for the same thing?
Like we said earlier, I think an immigrant would be an overarching term.
Okay.
So anyone who's coming over, and a refugee, I feel like would be someone who's fleeing from a hard situation. Well, I guess they're all a hard situation, but like a scary or a harmful situation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I would.
Like you can use sex trafficking as a reason to come in as a refugee, and
drug cartels.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's drugs that you can use. So it's things like that where you're truly in trouble. But then an immigrant, like my great-grandparents are immigrants. I mean, we're all come from immigrants, but a refugee is more, fleeing from a troubled area.
So a refugee is always an immigrant, but an immigrant is not always a refugee?
Yes.
Is that safe to say?
Yes.
All right, how do we treat refugees differently than other immigrants? Talk to me about their application process, talk to me about their stay, talk to me, I mean, do we just, once they're accepted, do they live here in perpetuity? What's the deal?
Once
so,
you're,
yeah, so, sorry. So, similar to all the other different status, you have to apply for a visa. The difference in asylee and refugees is that I feel like it's a bit more, once you can prove that you truly are a refugee, I think it's a bit more softened. And so, if you are a qualifying member of an asylee or refugee, you may apply for permanent residence 1 year after entry. And I did find some stuff in that we normally do take refugees over maybe like different categories.
Okay, they tend to get more weight. What else do we know about refugees, Liz?
What do you mean?
If I come here as a refugee, I'm fleeing a country that's got a tyrannical government, it's falling apart, something, and I come here, and I'm approved, Jalen said, there's the ability for me to apply and stay. Do I automatically get to stay forever, or is there a time limit to that, or are there stipulations? When do I not become a refugee anymore? Do I lose my refugee status if socioeconomic situations change in my home country?
so if you apply for a refugee visa,
Is that too big a softball?
if you apply for a refugee visa, you can live here as a refugee, and then once you apply for permanent residence, which is you can apply for it a year later, then if you are granted permanent